Composing meaningful alternative text. Using graphics such as images when creating learning material with Microsoft Office can be a great way to create visual representations of your content. The images you use can serve many different purposes, from simple decorations to visuals of complex processes. An important consideration when inserting images into your content is how you'll make them available to someone who's unable to see them. Many people with sight impairment have the ability to visualize an image when provided with a visual description. And in Microsoft Office, you can provide that visual description by typing a text representation of the image. A text representation of an image is also known as the image's alternative text. Microsoft Office has provided a place for you to replace an image with alternative text. The image will remain visible, but the text representation will be available to those who need it the most. When it's time to write alternative text, simply think about the context of the image. For our example, consider this picture of the moon. Questions to consider are: am I using this image basically as decoration? Is the image an example of something I mentioned earlier in the content? Or do I intend for the graphic to provide more information as a supplement to my content? My approach to writing the alternative text for this image will differ depending on the context of how I use the image. Let's take a closer look at each of these situations. A decorative image, for example, this image of the moon on this title slide, or this cartoon of an astronaut on the moon in my lecture, doesn't need much. If the decorative image were removed, the quality of the content won't degrade, so the alternative text could simply be a couple of words to state what's in the image. To write an alternative text, right-click the image and select Edit Alt Text. Alternatively, you can select the image, click the Format tab, and then select the Alt Text command. The Alt Text pane appears, and because this image is decorative, you might be tempted to check the box next to Mark as Decorative. This may look like a convenient option, but unfortunately this feature does not yet work properly, so we'll type the image's text representation in the text box. For this image, I think the alternative text, "Astronaut standing on the moon's surface while holding a hammer and feather," will suffice. When a sight-impaired learner hears this alternative text, it will be clear that there's no important information in the image. Let's take a look at the images on this page. On the previous page in this document, the instructor has written a few paragraphs detailing each of the phases of the moon and how the moon looks during each one. These two images are examples of the moon phases. Removing them would detract from the learning content, so each of their alternative texts will represent an overview of what's seen in the images. For the first image, I could type waning gibbous as it appears in the northern hemisphere. For the second image, I could type phases of the moon from waxing crescent through waning crescent as they appear in the northern hemisphere. Let's pause for a moment to review what we've learned so far. Here's an image of a sculpture of Galileo Galilei near a list of a few of his experiments. Would this be considered a decorative image or an example image? To answer that, remember to think about the context of the image. In this case, if I removed the image of Galileo, the content would not suffer, so this is a decorative image. For its alternative text, I would type Galileo Galilei, or perhaps sculpture of Galileo Galilei. There may be times when you'll need an image to supplement your content. Its purpose will be to accompany a point made in the content and to provide additional important information. Let's say that the topic of this lecture is an overview of telescope construction, and the instructor is using this image because it provides a cross-section of the refractor and reflector telescopes, highlighting the path light takes when it enters each telescope tube. The context of this image is neither a decoration nor an example. In this context, it is some of the instructional content, so it'll require a longer description so students will learn what the instructor intends for them to learn from it. The long description should be a part of the lecture content so all of the students can benefit from it, so I'll type it near the image. Here's another example of an image requiring a long description because it is learning content. The image is a timeline showing the order in which states ratified the Constitution, so the instructor wrote a long description of the timeline as a list below the image. We'll treat the alternative text for this image as we would an example image, For the timeline, I'll type timeline showing the order in which states ratified the Constitution. For the image of the telescope cross-sections, I'll type cross-section of the refractor and reflector telescopes. For each of these images, I'll also include a statement to let the student know that there's a longer description available and where it can be found. Something like, long description provided after image. In PowerPoint, this statement could be, long description provided in the slide notes. Deciding to use images is a great way to help students visualize your content. Accessible images always require alternative text, and long descriptions should be provided when the context of the image requires it. Taking some time to ensure all of your images are available to all of your students will help provide them with a richer educational experience.